Well, welcome in, Delta. We're so happy for you to be here. Excited to hear all about your travels and just everything that you're doing over there with Take Heart Africa.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm so happy to be here.
Praise God. Well, I say this to every guest that we have, and that is the purpose of this podcast is to help people grow in their relationship with Jesus Christ. And one of the things that we do is we try to learn about all of our guests' faith journeys. Would you please tell us a little bit about your faith journey?
Well, I think in my situation, I mean, everybody's faith journey begins at birth, but mine really began at birth because I was adopted when I was 2 days old. And so I recently, about 10 years ago, found my birth family. And now that I know the whole story, I know that it was nothing short of miraculous, that whole beginning. And so I was, my birth mother was not married. And so she ended up at her brother's house where he was stationed in Columbus, Georgia. And she ended up at the same doctor where my mother was. And when I refer to my mother, that's who I'm talking about, who raised me. So I never actually met my birth mother. So, but if I can tell you about my faith journey, because I'll let you tell you a little bit about my mom. And so my mom, at the time when she adopted me, was 42. And so, and my mother's, and I had a wonderful father too, but my mom is kind of the one that really made me the strong person that I am today. So when my mom was in her 20s, she already graduated from Southeastern Florida Southern and Augusta School of Nursing. And she got on a ship all by herself and went over to Liberia, West Africa. And then she went deep in the jungle and ran a leprosy colony. Wow. And so this woman, if somebody did that today, if my daughter or your daughter, you tell me about her, wanted to go deep into the jungle and run a leprosy colony, we would be like, are you sure? Well, this was the 1950s. And so she was just this incredible woman. She has so many amazing stories when she was there. She came back and ended up getting married in her early 30s and went back to Liberia, West Africa. And she had a child when she was there. She had a son. And then a period of 10 years lapsed. And during that time, she had 4 miscarriages. And so she had come back home because there was some civil war in Liberia, West Africa. And she had just delivered a stillbirth and was just very distraught and just couldn't seem to let go that she really wanted another child. So she's 42 at this point. And so that's kind of where I started and said that my birth mother came all the way from Alabama to Columbus, Georgia, and met at the same place. And so the doctor could do anything back then. So the doctor knew my mother's heartache and had just met my birth mother, and she didn't know what to do. And in 24 hours, my life totally crossed with these two amazing people. Their names were Mary and Joseph Judah. You cannot make that up. And so these two people, I was dropped literally into their laps. They had such a passion for missions. My mom and dad actually went back to Duke University to become physician assistants. And they eventually really were instrumental in launching healthcare ministries in the Assemblies of God Church. But for most of my life, I grew up here in Lakeland. I went to high school here, and they were doing medical missions and different things, but we were stationed here. And my mom worked in pediatrics here. My dad worked in surgery, both as PAs. And so my dad passed away early when he was 60. And so soon after that, this healthcare ministry's mission was launched, and my mom was a big part of that. And at her death, she had been in over 30 countries. Wow. She was incredible. I mean, she had 4 degrees, over 30 countries, a big risk taker. And she's the one who raised me. And to be honest, I had a terrible attitude about missions.
Wow.
And so that's why sometimes I always say, if you're listening to this and you really don't have a heart for missions and you really don't have a heart for the lost, and especially in other parts of the world, you know, I'm here to encourage you that that can all change, and that you can, you know, change that and have that passion. And so I was a great kid. I grew up in church. I grew up with two great examples. I can remember a very instrumental time in beginning to start the 8th grade. I had started making some friends at the school. I went to Crystal Lake Elementary, and then I'd started making some friends that weren't good, and my mom could sense that. And so she was really praying for me and wanted me to attend Evangel Christian. That was a Christian school in Lakeland at the time, and I didn't want to go, and I really wasn't. I had accepted Christ, but I wasn't really living for him at that age of 7th grade. So I remember a distinct evening. She was praying, I was in my room, and I just remember getting on my knees and just surrendering everything to God. And I made the decision to attend Evangel Christian, which was very instrumental for me. As I walked away from that group of friends, which really didn't go anywhere but down. So my mom really knew that. And so once I made that commitment in 8th grade, I really never looked back. My personality is all in or all out. Of course, I made mistakes. I've had seasons of closer to God and not closer to God. But during high school, I really served the Lord wholeheartedly. Like I said, my parents were traveling a lot during short-term medical missions. That was really their passion and calling. I went to the University of Florida and in Gainesville, go Gators. So my husband's a Gator, and both my girls my youngest is about to graduate next week. So we're all Florida grads. And so went up there, served the Lord all during college, definitely was involved in church and mentoring and Bible studies. And so my mom, I graduated in 93 and eventually came back to Lakeland, and I graduated as a physician assistant too, just like my parents, and worked in the emergency room here, and actually did that for 22 years. And so my mom and I were very close. Like I said, my dad died when I was 21, but I was actually obstinate with her about her passion for missions. She was gone a lot. She traveled, begged me to go with her, and I never did. And so she contracted pancreatic cancer and died in 1999. And so, like I said, I was just committed Christian, very involved in church, and just had a husband. And at that time, I already had one child. And so it was her death that really started my journey of this calling. I've had, two. I loved working as a PA, but it was her death in 1999 that began my journey. So when she died, all of a sudden I had a desire to go on a mission trip. Isn't that interesting? So yes. I've always said, when your mom dies, if it's good, then you're sad because she's gone. If it's bad, you have regrets that you didn't do, but it changes you. You're never the same person after, in my opinion, after the death. And my father too, but then, my mom, this was like, now I'm 30 and she was gone, and she was such just a strong support system in my life, an incredible example, the most amazing woman I've ever had, and the person who's had the most impact on me. So I went on a mission trip with my church, and we went to Ecuador, and it was a medical missions, and I loved every minute of it. I was like, oh my gosh, I was good at it. And probably that's the first time that I really felt like I understood my parents and their calling and their love for other parts of the world. And so when I came back, I had a great trip and really didn't expect it to do anything, but that's when God started working in my heart. And that started a long journey of seeking and sifting, and probably about a year or two after that first trip is when I really finally said, okay, I feel like I have a call. I feel like maybe I have a call to do something different. But I didn't know what it was. And immediately people were like, oh, you're going to go to the mission field, and, you're in medicine, and you're going to do this and that. Everybody's got their idea of what you're supposed to do. But my husband, who's a physical therapist, he didn't feel a call to missions, and he didn't feel a call to go to any part of the world. He was 100% supportive of me. So that really just began a long process. I even took a year off from work to search. I went on mission trips with not just my church, but other organizations. And it just was a long journey of trying to find that calling. And my pastor kept saying, you're going to come to a crossroads and you're going to know it immediately. And so that process took about 10 or 12 years. And then it was just I know in our faith journey, like I said, in 8th grade, like I really committed my life to the Lord. And then, but you're always growing, you're always sifting, you're always, God will say to me, okay, this can't go with us to the next level. Okay. So this area of your life, sometimes it could be a sin, and sometimes it could just be a habit. Sometimes it could be, something, a hurt from your past. It's just a matter of God speaking and saying, we need to deal with this because I know what's ahead for you. And I know this can't come with you. And so that was a process. And so I think that kind of summarizes, before I jump into like my next area or change in my life. But that's kind of a summary of my faith journey, kind of based around my calling and my parents. Actually, God, like I said, I feel just so honored and chosen that God, he knows us all when we're formed. But obviously mine, my beginnings, God was watching that and had a very specific purpose and plan for me from the very beginning.
Praise God. You said, God said, this can't go with us to the next level. That's gold. That's gold, because we have to get that, because, how many people walk away from God because they're kicking and screaming, holding on to that thing that God says, I like that. This can't go with us to the next level.
I always felt like an example of that, or what God taught me. I call them wilderness seasons of life. Sometimes God takes us to the wilderness to be tested, like Jesus. Sometimes we take ourselves to the wilderness for bad habits or addictions or sin or whatever you want to say. And then some people push us to the wilderness from abuse, from neglect, things that may happen to us in childhood. And so I felt like I definitely have been in and out of multiple seasons of wilderness, but I felt like God gave me the example of that Jesus went to the wilderness for 40 days, and the Israelites stayed in the wilderness for 40 years because they didn't get it. They didn't get what they were supposed to get. And I feel like so many believers will wander their whole life in the wilderness because they don't, really learn the lesson that they were supposed to learn. So I feel like God said to me, we all get our choice of how long we stay, in the wilderness, and until we learn what we need to learn, and then until we let go of what, what God is working on our lives to do. So,
I'm blown away at how much gold you've already given. and I definitely appreciate that. So you said that you were pausing. You said you were about to go into that next. Will you take us already into that next phase, or that next, what you were about to talk about?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I loved my career as a physician assistant. I actually functioned best in chaos, and that's why I love the emergency room. I just took some kind of personality. You know, we're always taking tests and strengths and weaknesses, and it actually said, "Be careful in structure because you'll feel like you're not in the right place." So I love to be in chaos. I love to work. I'm a very adaptable. I can adjust to things. So I had loved medicine, always wanted to be in medicine from a little girl. And like I said, went to the University of Florida, graduated as a PA, and was working in the emergency room for 22 years. And like I had taken that first trip to Ecuador around 2000 and felt the call of God on my life. Knew I was going to do something different, but I had no idea what it was. And then I met my birth family. So in March of 2012, now interesting thing, now my mom had been dead now for over 10 years, but one of the most important things before my mom died is she wanted me to find my birth family. She was adamant about it. And so we tried twice and didn't find the person because my mom didn't have the right name. But we had a great relationship, but she just said, I don't know why, but something about your future has to do with your birth family.
Wow.
And so after she died, I tried one more time and hit another wall. And then I got some information from the state of Georgia that gave me the age of my mom, my birth mother, but no identifying information. It was just general information that one of the investigators had gotten me. And then the social worker said to me, I can find your birth mother. And yeah, I've got enough information. It'll cost, it was really cheap. You know, it wasn't even a lot of money. And all of a sudden I just sat on it for like 5 years.
Oh.
I didn't do anything with it. I'm a risk taker by nature, but I just was a little bit hesitant about that. Like, why do I want to find that? And so it's a funny story. My 90-year-old aunt, who I was so close to, my mom's older sister, she turned 90, and I told her I would do anything for her. What do you want to do on your birthday? And she said, I want you to fill out those papers. I want you to fill out those papers and send them in. And I said, oh my, now I have to do that. So I filled them out. Her birthday was October 31st. And 3 weeks later, I get a call that she's found my birth mother. And so that particular story of my birth mother is a whole nother podcast, but that didn't necessarily end very well. But in that process, I learned that I had a sister, but it was from my birth father's side. So my birth mother had been bitter for 45 years toward him. And so, like I said, that's a whole different story. But in the process of a long, about 3 months that we went through this, I discovered I had a sister, and we eventually met. We met in actually 10 years ago in March of 2012, and also met my birth father, who at this time was serving the Lord and had been married to the same woman for 36 years. And so he had married my birth sister's mom, and they ended up divorcing. And so he had been married to the same woman for 36 years. So we met. My sister's name is Misty, and we immediately were like soulmates. I don't even know how to describe it to you. Our families get along. Her husband and her actually ended up selling everything about 3 years ago and moving to Honduras. And so I met Misty and the family the first time in March. I went to visit them in Alabama in May of 2012. In June, about 2-3 weeks after I left, she calls me and says, my church is going to Kenya, and I don't know why, but you're supposed to come with me. I can't get it off my heart. We have one spot open. And I said, I'm going. I didn't even breathe. I didn't hesitate because my mom's heart was Africa, and she begged me to come with her. And she would take trips back to Liberia, because she went all over the world, like I said, 30 countries, but her heart was always in Africa. And so I got on an airplane in October of 2012 with 7 strangers, because I didn't even know my sister. I'd only met her twice, and 6 other people. And I got on that airplane and went to Kenya. And then that's where everything changed. So I can tell you the rest of that story, and that kind of leads, into the calling of God. But it was a lot of things that had to happen. Number one, my mother stating that I needed to find my birth family, and so that's a neat thing for sure.
I'm sitting here, I'm speechless. like I would love to hear as much as you want to share. And there is no doubt that God is moving, has moved, and you could just see the pieces of the puzzle falling. I want you to find your birth family. I don't know why, but I want you to find it, and you wait. I'll give you anything, man. Right. You shouldn't say that anymore. I'll give you anything. I want you to fill out that paperwork. And look at our sovereign God, who you think you're waiting. You think it's, I'm puttering around. No. God has it timed so that right when you meet your sister, he sends you to Kenya, and now look at you.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
The timing of God is incredible. I had a small group today with 6 of our girls in Kenya, thanks to Google Meets, and we were talking about how do you hear God, and then why do you feel distant sometimes from God? And sometimes one girl was very open and said, his timing is really difficult for me right now. And so it's encouragement to know. So like I said, October 2012, I got on that airplane, went to that country of Kenya, no idea that what was going to happen. But like I said, remember my pastor kept saying, you're going to come to a crossroads.
Right.
Because I was pretty frustrated knowing that God had something for me, and I was disturbed in my spirit, in a good way, disturbed to know that there was going to be a change. Years and years and years have passed since I made that commitment to God. And so I just was on an airplane, being obedient, going to a country. And it was that trip that everything did change. And one of the first things that happened was we were in a really remote village. In fact, Google Earth didn't even know we were there till a few years ago. So I took a lady in her 70s a few years ago, and she said, God does not know that we're here. I'm convinced of it. Because she said, I checked Google Earth and it doesn't know where we are. And so we're just so remote. And people always say, how did you ever get here? And, so it's not like it's a big city. It's not like, it's just a really rural place. And so we stayed in an orphanage, and it was a boy and girl orphanage, but we stayed, of course, with the girls. And they were teenagers, the majority of them. Wow. And that was the first thing that was so unusual about this trip. And so we stayed in an orphanage of teenagers. And I remember arriving there late at night. We were tired. This place was not very nice. Electricity wasn't there. It was squatty potties. And I was like, what have I gotten myself into on this trip? And so, we unpacked, and you've got 30 girls just staring at you. And the great thing about Kenya is that English is one of their languages, especially if they've been in school. And I remember saying to them, because I have a real gift to connect with people, and I don't know why, I felt like just God say, ask them, can they sing? And I said, do you guys like to sing? And they loved it. The whole community has an incredible gift of voices, of harmony. And so I remember that we kind of sat down, and I could tell that I had, connected with them, and they started into a song. And the song, I didn't know it was going to become so meaningful to me, but the song was named Conquerors. And so they went into the song, I'll never forget as long as I live. And there's a line in the song that says, "Dedicate me on my way until I reach my destiny." And I found my destiny in that village on that trip. And the girls, to this day, I just got back from 18th trip, they sing it to me over and over again. "Dedicate me on my way till I reach my destiny." They all know that's my favorite song. There are girls that are still in my life that sang that song to me in 2012.
Wow.
That are still, that God has still allowed our paths, to stay together. And so that was just from the very beginning of that trip, even how I got asked to go. But from the time I stepped foot on that land in Kenya, it was different. It was a different trip. And so living in the orphanage of teenagers, most of them the ages of my own girls. So I just really became aware of their stories and learned so much about them. We connected in a really unusual way. And so also on that first trip, in the middle of the night, we heard screams and cries. And so we woke up the next morning and asked the local pastor what happened. And he told us that there was a widow that hung herself.
Oh.
And so that really hit me hard. And I remember we had our clinic that day. That was a medical trip. We had our clinic. And at the end of the day, we bought some food to take it to the family. So, that's kind of what you would do here. Right. And so it was only maybe a 3-minute walk, really, the next property. That's why we could hear the sounds. And we walked over, and I remember that moment. Like I said, this whole trip had been impactful for me. I remember walking up. It was just a slight hill. It was a wide, piece of land, grassy. I can see it to this day. But it was almost like just me and God. This has only happened to me like twice. And it was kind of like we were walking up this property, and I could take the whole scene in. I was looking at the mud house where she was living. I was looking at her children, and I was just processing everything. And it was not audible, wasn't an audible voice, because we have a joke in the emergency room. You don't ever come in and say God's speaking to you, because we have a really nice place for you to go. We have a room with nothing on the walls, because there are plenty of people that God is speaking to them. And so, but not really God, they're hearing voices. And so but in church, it's okay to say God is speaking to you, but in the ER, you don't ever do that, or you'll be in trouble. So anyway, as I was walking up, it wasn't audible, but it was the strongest impression I've ever had. And I felt like the Holy Spirit said to me, "This is where I want you to come. This is where I want you to bring hope to these people." And it was kind of like just me and God. And then that haziness went away, and I didn't even know what to do, but I knew it was different. And I finished the trip. We went on a nice safari. My sister and I bonded for life on that trip. And I got into the airport. They'd left to go to Alabama, and I was taking a different flight to come to Florida. And I emailed my pastor and my husband from the airport in London and said, "This is it. I have found it." I had come to that crossroads and knew it. I knew it immediately. And so that began the journey and the calling of Take Heart, where I am today.
Now, did you name it Take Heart right away, or has it gone through some iterations?
So I came back and didn't have any intentions of starting a nonprofit. And so I knew it was different. I knew I was going to be involved. And I started getting actively involved in another family that totally changed my life and put me in. But my daughter was on, like, we called a fine arts team, and they were doing a human video. And I was the team mom. And so this is competition, serious stuff. And the name of the song in our group, it was by Hillsong United. The name of the song was called Take Heart, that we were doing. So when I came back and I was listening to the song again, there's a line in the song that says, his love will lead you through the night. And the widow didn't make it through the night. And all suicides, if you know anything about suicide, happens at night. It happens in the dark. It happens. Things are always, even if you're not depressed or anything, if you're a little bit down, night's always harder than the day time. And so I felt like the Holy Spirit said, name it. I want you to name it Take Heart. Now, then I found all these amazing verses. John 16:33, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I've overcome the world. Be strong and take heart, and Psalms. And even 1 Chronicles 28, where in the Message version, that's been a big verse for me this year. Take charge, take heart. When David is talking to Solomon to build the temple, because I now have a calling to build a school and a guest house. So God has given me some, real dreams for that. So Scripture is key, that carries you those words. And so I came back and became an official nonprofit in 2014. And that really, started the journey, and resigned from my job in April this month, 8 years ago in 2014. So I have not practiced medicine in 8 years.
Wow. And haven't missed it once.
I have actually. I loved medicine. I really did. It was, people will say, oh, I couldn't wait to get out of that job. But that really wasn't me. And I think in the 10 years or 12 years prior to my first calling that I was to do something different, I even took a year off. I think I mentioned that. I took a year off from work. I don't know if it was like a test to see if I would resign my job, because, it's a big job to walk away from. It's a very good career. And but I know 100% sure this is where I'm supposed to be. So but to say I didn't miss it, even to this day, I think I even just told someone an hour ago,
wow,
that I do occasionally miss it at times. So, and I really believe one day I'll have a clinic in Kenya. So that will maybe help me there some. So
I have kind of an audible question, but it's based on you saying you kind of miss it. So your parents were PAs, you become a PA, and now you have this ministry that you're over in Kenya. And I'm just curious, you may not have even given this any thought. Do you feel like walking away from or resigning your position as being a PA? Was there some connectivity there with, because your parents were that, and now you're not that anymore? That's just a curious question.
It's very interesting, because my parents' passion, before they went back, my mom was always a nurse at first, and then she went back to PA school at Duke University, and my dad did too. So their whole passion was medical missions. And that tends to be more evangelistic and short term. And in my exploratory time, when I was taking all these trips, about the 5th medical trip, I stopped. I didn't enjoy medical missions. It's a necessity and it's needed. I don't like to say, okay, hey, good to see you today. What's wrong? Oh, in another country, oh, my arm hurts, or my stomach hurts, or this hurts. Okay, let me give you some medicine. Do you know Jesus? Let me pray for you. And then they're gone. It became clear that I was a discipler.
Yes.
And so they're both needed. I think we were just talking about, we love people who can just go up and ask somebody. Right. But then there's those of us that want to do life with people, and we want to disciple you and be a part of your life. And And I think Jesus was actually a discipler. I mean, he discipled some evangelists, but Jesus as a whole, he did talk to the masses, but you never hear like people coming, they came forward by the thousands. He spoke to them and taught, but he was always saying, okay, let me take you away and teach you this.
Right. That's good.
Let me invest all my time in these 12 kind of crazy people, that we were always encouraged by Peter and some of, the rest of them. But it became clear that wasn't my calling. And so it was like I said, I do have a dream to have like a clinic, but it would be something that would be there permanently. It wouldn't just be like a stand-up clinic. And so it became very clear that the medical part of my life, at least being the dominant aspect, was a season of 22 years. And that this season that started 10 years ago was going to be very different, and even a different calling from my parents. So many similarities, but this one was my, was God's calling to me. More of an emphasis on education, more of an emphasis on empowerment of women and small business. And once again, the main focus on discipleship of walking through life, which to me is a lot harder. And it's not that one's worse or better. When you have to do life with broken people, it can be very challenging at times. You can have the joys you can't, even understand and just praise, but then you just have the heartaches of people choosing poorly because of what happened to them a lot of times in childhood, and then loving them back, loving them unconditionally. It was just recently, it was a couple of weeks before Easter, and we had a special speaker at our church, for a teacher, and it was on the cross, of course. And, we all have to say, okay, let me focus my mind on the cross. I mean, because we're like, here it comes again, the cross, which is silly. But I meant, like, I just remember thinking, okay, so he was asking what drove Jesus to the cross, and he was being like outside the box. Okay, so Jesus went to the cross. There were many things that had to happen. Pilate had to give the order. He couldn't go to the cross without Pilate's order.
Right.
Judas had to betray him. He had to fulfill prophecy. He, there's a lot of different things that we did there, but then he kind of honed in, what is the reason that he went to the cross? What were the like two main things? And he built it up a lot more than this. So by the time you got there, you could almost answer them, because we know in the garden, he wanted to quit. Yeah. He made it very clear that we knew that he was asking, not quit, but could there be another way?
No, I understand what you mean.
Yeah. Not, and so he went to the cross for love. That was, to me, the main reason he went, for his love for you, his love for me. And then I think when the love might have stopped, it was just sheer obedience. I can tell you that sums up my last 10 years, is that I have an incredible love for these people that God has called me to serve. And I always think of the cross, I had to carry my cross today. I mean, that kind of brought up, but when we do something for love, all of a sudden the heavy cross that we have to carry for our callings or whatever God's asking us to do, it's lighter. And it kind of made sense to me during this teacher. God's always teaching us things. And then when the times when it's so hard, when you've just had so many letdowns and you don't feel like you're making, progress, then it's just obedience to the call. It's just it's obedience to say, okay, I'm going to stay committed to the call. I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to ask for a way out. I'm going to stay the course, because I know this is what God, has asked me to do. So it was just a good reminder too, that, love God gives you just a love for the people that he calls you to serve. And I have to say that's the truth for me.
Praise God. That is so good. I'm going to be bold right now, and I'm going to ask a huge favor of you. I'm going to ask that you promise that you are going to come back, because we have to end our podcast episode here. But I know that there's so much you've given us, and I believe there's so much more that we can glean from your story. I think you said earlier that your story with your biological mom, there was something there that could be its own podcast episode. So I think I'm taking that as you saying, yes, I will come back and be on your podcast again.
Yes, of course. I'd be happy to come back for sure.
So I will definitely, reach out to you, not in the far too distant future, to bring you back, so that because there's more that I know I would want to know, and I'm sure that others would want to know. We hear, like, I'm going to be honest with you. If you say, what's the first word that pops in your mind, and you say to me, Kenya, I'm going to say long distance runners.
Absolutely. They just won. They're the top runners in the world. And I've been right. Yeah, I've been right where they trained. So yes, they just won the Boston Marathon. They were the top.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate your time. And I'm sure that our audience appreciates the time. If you could give our listeners one kind of thought of encouragement, I would really appreciate that as we close this episode.
Absolutely. I would encourage people. Maybe I'm teaching this now, to learn to listen and to hear from God, because he wants to speak to us. And we all are amazed that he wants to use us. I'm a weak vessel, but I am convinced that he's very specific, and he has something for each of us to do. Everybody can't run off to Africa, because who's going to teach our children in the high school? Who's going to run the emergency room? Everybody has that very specific. And so I want to encourage people to learn the skill of listening to God, because he's speaking, and he has something very, very specific. And it just because I get to go to Africa, and I'm one of those few people begging God to send me to Africa. I want to go all the time. I could go live over there. Some people will say, I'll go anywhere but Africa. It's different what people are calling, but God has something very, very specific for each of us to do. And don't give up searching for that. Don't give up until you find that, and then just put your whole life into it, of calling and seasons too. Motherhood, there's nothing more important in the home on motherhood. I have the highest respect for teachers. You're life changers. We all can say out loud a teacher that meant something to us, and that can change a person's trajectory. And so what people do in the emergency room is so important. And so anyway, that's what I felt to say as an encouragement to just keep seeking and listening to what God would have you to do.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for your time. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.